Welcome everyone to Male Fuzz TV. I am Peter, and today I'm going to talk about The Boys Season 3 Episode 4. It's called Glorious 5-Year Plan. And I suppose the first phrase that comes to mind when I think of this episode is death by dildo. Right? That's like most episodes of The Boys have a thing that sticks out, right? Literally in this case. That is like, like episode 1 had the dick explosion thing and like so on and so on. This episode has the dildos, and I can't help but feel that this was based on a meme. So that this was a thing, like this might even be, no, it's not a decade ago, but it's maybe close to a decade ago now. There was like a fake image made up of like a range of dildos and sex toys based on the Avengers. And it was a funny joke. It did the rounds online, and it was, each dildo was based on each Avenger character, and they kind of had something that kind of tied loosely to what that character's power set are or something. In this episode, we had that for the 7. We had the Homelander dildo, we had the Starlight dildo that sort of lit up, and so on and so on. We actually see the Homelander one twice, technically. Although I suppose, to be really technical about it, I suppose the second time we saw it, it was a separate product because it was the Homelander strap-on. But that's... I mean, if it wasn't clear at this point that there's going to be adult conversation topics and themes when I talk about The Boys, well, you've been warned now. Yeah, a lot of big things in this episode. There's a lot of great scenes in particular. I think this is my favourite of the episodes of the season so far. Largely just down to how it subverted a few things, but also what it did in sort of big moments. One of my favourite scenes of the season so far is actually Huey standing up to Homelander, just for a brief second of like, I don't give a shit what you do to me, I'm showing that you can't, that I will stand up to you. When Homelander shows up and is throwing the whole like public Starlight romance in his face. And then, asks very inappropriately if she's good in the sack, although he said it much more severely than that. And Huey, just stands up to him, and Starlight's eyes light up, and she, makes a very clear threat to Homelander that she will ruin all of this public perception if Huey is touched. And what's so smart about this? Because it's actually smart in level. There's layers to the intelligence of this scene. Is that one... It's actually foreshadowing and setting up the ending in which the threat to Huey is reiterated through another means, right? When he kills Super Soaker, Super Sonic, that's his name, Super Soaker. And he says, if you don't play by the rules anymore, Huey's next. This will be Huey. So it sets up that, right, which is really smart. It's smart because it occurred to me in this scene that all of that worry I had in those first couple of episodes, that we're kind of doing a love triangle thing with Supersonic, and I was like, I don't really want them to tease this or even bother going down this path. I actually, in retrospect, kind of like it, because it wasn't about teasing an actual love triangle, it was about teasing this weird, warped, fake one with Homelander. Because the Homelander thing never feels like an actual love triangle, because we know Starlight isn't like him like that. There's no danger of that. It's this threatening, third point to the triangle that is severe. In many ways, she's become the new Maeve. Homelander himself compares it to Maeve and how, that was a public relationship, but then it turned into something spicy, and Homelander does all these things. This was a phenomenal Homelander episode, by the way. There were several moments with him were great in this, because of how they kind of played off the things that had been set up. So that was just one of these little things where in this scene, as we get this, love triangle, quote unquote, playing out with Homelander, I was like, oh, that's what the Supersonic thing was all about. It was setting this up. And of course, Supersonic turns out to be a bit of a red shirt. He was not long for this world, as it turned out. Technically, I suppose he could have swapped him with another person and put him in the suit because his head was completely laser visioned off, but he's probably dead. I think he was intentionally kind of this generic pretty boy. I don't mean that in the demeaning way, but just in the sense that he was, he's from a boy band and he's ultra charming and he's in Starlight's passion. He had this sort of generic quality to him, and I think that was kind of intentional because they were going to kill him off so quick. But I really like that scene, that sort of leaving for work breakfast scene, whatever you want to call it, with those three characters. And of course, Huey. I never even mentioned the vomit in the face from last episode. That's the problem with doing 3 episodes in one. There's like just bits you forget to talk about. So Huey knows that Billy's taken the compound V, or I should say the temp V, and he wants a crack at it later because he's feeling, he's feeling weak. He's feeling belittled. He's feeling like Homelander is directly starting to challenge him, and so for whatever reason, and not in a healthy way, but he feels like he wants a crack at this as well. So yeah, our main team of boys goes off to Russia to track down possibly the weapon that took out Soldier Boy. Of course, there they actually find that Soldier Boy's alive and in like a sort of tank, kind of like Winter Soldier, which I didn't say that exactly, but I said he was definitely alive, and it wasn't a great prediction. I feel like most people would have predicted that, but I'll take the easy points regardless. But there's a lot of stuff that happens on that trip, so I'm going to shift to that for now, and I'll come back to all the other VOT stuff and whatever. They go off to this trip, and there's a lot of character stuff here. Kimiko's been feeling like a monster. She doesn't want to do this to other people. She doesn't just want to be a gun, as she puts it in this episode. But Billy's signed her up to go and assassinate someone. Billy's like, no, you're going to go do this. You're going to go pretend to be one of the prostitutes. You're going to go in and you're going to kill this guy. And she's not happy about it. But she does it anyway. And we get this sequence of her getting in the sparkly dress. And then we get the aforementioned death by dildo. Multiple deaths by dildo. We could have a death by dildo counter, because I think she kills at least 3 people with a dildo in this scene. The first one, of course, is especially funny because she stabs it through the back of his head and it comes out of his mouth. So it looked a little bit like an alien kind of like mouth, like as in the movie Alien, the xenomorph. It looked kind of like that as it came through, because I think it was the Black Noir dildo. Or maybe it was just because it was covered in blood and gunk at this point. It didn't matter, so it just looked like anything. But I think that's what it was. But again, this scene plays into the actual character that we're dealing with here, right? So we get the moment where the prostitutes, who she doesn't want to hurt, right, are scared of her. In fact, one of them shoots her in the head, and we get the kind of the Wolverine-esque, the wound heals and she gets back up. And she's trying to tell these girls that she's not going to hurt them, right? She's trying to communicate that with body language. And it plays back into, again, that she doesn't want regular people or people who are innocent to be scared of her. She doesn't want to be that. And this leads to a conversation with Frenchie where she's like, screw Billy, we should leave. Let's go and do our own thing. And Frenchie agrees. Now, obviously, we're early in the season. I suspect that this is not going to go well. I say we're early. We're halfway through now, technically, because there's only 8 episodes, but you know what I mean. I suspect this is not going to go to plan. Changes, choices will be made. Someone might die. There's a lot of reasons why it might not go through. And also, there's going to be a season 4 that got announced this week, so which is great news, but also it means I'm less likely to expect a happy ending at the end of the season. One that's lasting anyway. But it was kind of a sweet moment where Frenchie agrees, and it was a really genuine little beat between these two characters, and she's so happy. And I really appreciated that Frenchie said, well, let's finish this particular mission, because this is not just for Billy, this is for Huey, and it's for MM, and they need us too. And Kimiko doesn't argue that. Kimiko's still just happy that he said yes, and they go off to do it. Which actually, speaking of, there's also another kind of sweet scene between Billy and MM, and this is also very smart in how it's building till the end of the episode. So much of what happens in this episode really pays off at the end, and both the big main plots, right? With this one, Billy kind of like admits to MM like why he was picked in the first place. He says that MM was the guy who kept like his squad together back when he was training in basic, and that's why he's kind of there. He's like, yeah, like Billy's the one calling the shots, but MM's there to look after everyone because he's the one who cares. He's the father figure. He's the one who's actually going to take care of everyone. And it was kind of a sweet moment when he says this because it felt kind of genuine, and it harkens back to a lot of what we've talked about in the past with Billy and Huey, and how Huey's kind of his like conscience, or he's the person who's there to kind of inspire him to be better, in a way that He'd been missing from his life since Becca left him or went missing, So I thought that was a really sweet little moment, and it's why it's so effective later on when it has the payoff after everything goes down and says, there's no one left to take care of. You ruined all of this, Billy. So you really feel like Billy has just absolutely destroyed everything in his team. And just when you get a sense of humanity from him, that things are going to be, he does have the best interest, and he still kind of does, in the same way that he doesn't want Huey to take the Temp V. He's like, no, this is poison. You shouldn't do this. It's hypocritical, but you get why he's thinking that in his mind. Like, I'll take the bullet and to have this awful thing to try and succeed in this mission, but I don't want to do that to Huey. I don't want to corrupt Huey. But of course, Huey does get corrupted, which is also sad. Huey, and it's a good swerve, because when they're in the factory or whatever it is towards the end, and they're looking for this weapon, and there's experimental hamsters and stuff, which are amusing in their own right. And all the soldiers show up, and they're getting they're pinned down, and there's that slow motion moment where Billy looks over at Huey, and Huey nods at him you need to do it. You need to use your powers that you've given yourself. And we get this glorious heat vision display from Billy, just slicing through all these soldiers, and everyone's shocked, and it's a big moment, big deal. Because this is what's so good about it, is that this would have been big enough on its own, is Billy revealing to the rest of the team that he had taken something to have powers. It was a big enough moment on its own, but then you got the extra swerve with Huey doing, it looked like he had Ant-Man powers, it looked like he shrunk down in his clothes and then popped back up naked, and didn't necessarily intentionally mean to punch right through the man's chest, but he did it anyway. And he did it for a good reason, because there was a guy behind he was doing it to save him, so there's kind of a noble reason for jumping into action in the first place, even though everyone's then going to be disappointed by what he's done, including Billy, and everyone's going to be disappointed with Billy for doing this in the first place, but also corrupting Huey. Right? So you've got these layers all at play. So all those scenes from earlier on, and then right after us, of course, Kimiko gets injured from Soldier Boy, who steps out of the tank. Or is that right? Is that before all the powers get used? I can't remember the order at the end, but either way, it doesn't really matter. Kimiko's injured, so Frenchie's distraught because Kimiko's injured and she's not healing like she's supposed to. Whatever Soldier Boy blasted her with, this new power that he has, is not healing instantly. So you've got that kind of payoff to their connection throughout the episode. You've got the payoff to Billy and Huey. You've got the payoff between Billy and and everything they talked about. All of it kind of comes back around at the end and pays off all at the same time. And it makes it a very satisfying and well-written episode, I think, when you have an episode that feels so focused like that, where it doesn't feel forced. It just feels natural that all the things that were set up throughout the episode all kind of crescendo at the same time. In the same scene. All this stuff happens, and some of it is just the same outcome that affects both setups. And that's kind of cool. So I found all that is engaging to watch, and with this show you're constantly hoping the heart will win out. You're hoping for the good characters to speak sense. You're hoping at the end that won't give up on the team and that he'll be there to actually look after them, because it feels like he's kind of given up and he's mad at Billy at the end. Wouldn't be the first time, admittedly, but you're hoping that it's going to work out. And they're at one of the lower points of the season here at the end. And obviously they fly in a private jet that the Russian lady got for them and whatever else. So yeah, Soldier Boy being alive is interesting. Not surprising, but the fact that he's not immediately with someone and he's just out there somewhere now, because he just leaves. He's out in the wild. Who knows where he is? Who knows what he cares about? Is he going to clash with Homelander when that inevitably happens? Are they going to be buddies because they're similar to each other? Or I don't know. And that's kind of interesting. So that's all cool. What's funny is I don't know which side of the plot I like more. So that's one side of the plot. The other side of the plot is all the stuff back at Vought with Homelander, Starlight, and all the other characters on the team. And there's a lot of good scenes here, because again, it does this great swerve where it feels like all the good characters are building a little squad to eventually turn on Homelander, because Starlight goes to Maeve, and Maeve's clearly up for taking down Homelander, and they're kind of speaking themselves up. Starlight's trying to you convince Maeve that she's worth saving, and like she shouldn't just like die in this battle, that she should go on. I did like, it's funny, I did read since last week that the actress who plays Maeve wasn't there for a lot of the filming because of the pandemic. There was some travel restrictions or whatever. I don't know. I mean, I know she's Irish. I don't know if it's because she still lives there or she lives somewhere else, but she couldn't make it like to the shooting as much as everyone else did. So it was funny as because it did occur to me after I read that yeah, she wasn't really in a lot of the first 3 episodes. She had a couple of scenes in episode 1 to give Billy the information, but then she was kind of gone. And then here in this episode, she's in this scene with Starlight, which feels very separate in that they could have shot this like later on when she was around. And she is in kind of a group scene later on though when they're all watching the TV. So there is like occasionally she's popping up, but it does kind of feel like there's a limited amount of her. Maybe they were being very wise with where they slot her character in, so you don't feel the absence too much. But because I've read it now, I am noticing a little bit like just how kind of separate a lot of her scenes are, and that she's always just seems to be with one person. Not all the time, like I said, there is at least one scene where she's with others, but it does feel very separate compared to like her inclusion in previous seasons. But I mean, obviously, it's nothing they can do about it. They seem to have worked around it the best they could. But Starlight goes to Supersonic and tells him about this. She doesn't give him the details, but says, "Hey, at some point we may have to like fight a Homelander." And he's like, and this actually felt like the other payoff to the love triangle thing, where he kind of says, "Of course I'll do it for you. You're the only woman I've ever loved." And Starlight immediately starts to be like, "Hey, I've got a boyfriend," and then he's like, "I'm just effing with you, like, get over yourself. I'm doing it because it's the right thing to do," which made me like him a little bit more. Actually, it made him a little bit more interesting because it felt like a genuine like joke. But it kind of like hit the nail on the head for me. Like the teasing before now was more about spinning it into Homelander being the love triangle character rather than him. But what I liked about all this is that it's building, and then it looks like they're going to recruit A-Train. Or I say they. Supersonic tries to recruit A-Train after A-Train has an incident with the Deep and Homelander. And obviously you're pissed at A-Train by the end of the episode because it seems like he has tried to win favor from Homelander by ratting Starlight and Supersonic out, which is why Homelander does the horrible thing he does by the end of the episode. What was interesting though, right before this, as it was setting this up, and the Deep and A-Train get into the little fight, which is following the scene where A-Train tries to talk about this C-lister superhero who's like targeting black communities, and Homelander is just annoyed that he has to listen to it. But the Deep's wife sort of like texts the Deep again and is sort of directing what he should do. And the Deep says, "Hey, that would be bad for you because your like biggest demographic would support all this stuff. So maybe you should keep your nose out of this, Homelander." And Homelander's like, "You know what, Deep? That's actually quite smart. Yeah, that's enough of that." But because he does this, because he interjects to contradict or to battle A-Train's suggestion, they end up having this spat in the hallway. And what I thought was interesting here is that they kind of threaten each other by whispering. They're trying to not have Homelander hear them. And one of the things that A-Train says is that Deep was the one that fished the video out of the water and gave it to Maeve from the plane incident. And they start fighting. And it did occur to me, I think at this point, the Deep, I don't think can be redeemed. I think he's too much of a Weasley piece of shit for that to ever happen. But what I did think was interesting about this is that this gives him a reason to want to be on board for taking Homelander down at some point. The idea, not because he's going to be good or because he's decided it's the right thing to do, but because there's a reason that Homelander would be pissed at him and want to kill him. He has a reason to be okay, if not even outright help at some point, if push comes to shove. And it's like, well, if I don't help them take down Homelander, Homelander's going to rip me in half because I've done something that will upset him. And it sounds like, and that's the thing, as this was playing out, I was thinking, okay, so A-Train, more and more it feels like A-Train's got a good reason to side with the good guys, and he's already kind of done it in the past. And maybe the Deep's got a reason to eventually want to help take down Homelander for his own safety. But of course, A-Train seemingly has pulled this heel swerve. Now, admittedly, we don't really have the full context yet. Like maybe there's a possibility that it's not as nefarious as it seems, and I don't want to say accidental per se, but that he didn't necessarily try to get anyone killed or whatever, or didn't realize the consequences of ratting them out and what it would be, or I'm being probably a bit too generous with that. I'm just wondering if there's maybe a bit more to it than he just was an evil piece of shit and ratted them out, to get into Homelander's good books. But it also may just be that, and that's fine. In the sense that Homelander's going to have these allies who are with him, and we can go down that path. But I didn't think that was an interesting little beat to play. As well as all this stuff with Homelander and his new fan base, and or like his strengthening his white male demographic and all that, and you see him on the talk show earlier on. That leads to this new character. Well, I think it's a new character anyway, but the talk show host ends up showing up talking to Ashley later on. And Ashley's around looking very stressed about various things throughout the episode. Apparently, a running gag this season is going to be Ashley's wild sex life, because in the first episode, with the premiere for Dawn of the Seven, which had, I don't even know if I talked about a lot of this last time, but the reshoots and the parallels to Justice League, and even the fact that it's called Dawn of the Seven, which Homelander references this episode. But there's that scene where she's having sex with a director in the bathroom, and it's kind of quirky and like the self-humiliation kind of way, where she's like belittling the director as she's riding them. Here we kind of get a follow-up to that, where Homelander chews her out earlier in the episode, and then later on when she's talking to this TV show host, she kind of repeats the same insult back at him. And it turns into this weird kinky foreplay where she says, if this is what you're doing, I'll have to punish you. And he goes, how would you punish me? And she pulls out the Homelander strap on, and then he's into it. He's like, oh yeah, punish me. And she has a sick smile that goes across her face. It's amusing. It's very it's a very interesting running thing to do with Ashley, and Ashley's definitely kind of like a supporting character who's there for something like this, to have this quirky running gag, as opposed to be someone that we deeply care about and invest in, at least so far. Like maybe they'll go further with her down the line. But I thought that was it was a fun gag. I was not expecting to see one of those dildos again in another scene. So it was like, if anything, it was doubly funny because we'd just seen some of these sex toys for the first time a few scenes prior. So I don't know. I got a kick out of that. The big thing in this plot, though, is the other big swerve of the episode, which is that Newman actually turns on Edgar. She's in cahoots with Homelander because Homelander's given her Compound V, because she wants Compound V so that her daughter can have superpowers, so her daughter will not be vulnerable. She wants her daughter to have powers. But she turns on Edgar at a press conference, and like this episode is very much Homelander regaining control and be like, no, now I'm in charge of this company. Now I don't know if he literally is in charge of the company yet, but that's clearly kind of like the feeling that he wants. And he's like, this is the Dawn of the Seven. He asserts his strength to Starlight at the end, makes her cry and realize that he will murder Huey if she tries any more conniving or plotting or planning or anything like that. What I love though about this Homelander stuff is the way that, like, so he goes to Edgar after this happens, and Edgar is just quiet for like the first half of the scene, and Homelander just won't shut up. He keeps trying to like prod him into reacting, and it just shows you again just how immature Homelander is. Edgar calls him a gaping like pit of insecurity or something like that, which is very accurate. But even before Edgar starts talking, like I was getting this vibe that like it's not enough that he's gained this control. It's not enough that he's gotten rid of Edgar. I keep saying that weird Edgar. It's not enough that he's gotten rid of him. It's not enough that he's pulled this swervy play on him. He has to like go and glow. He wants a reaction. He wants to revel in it. Edgar even says that it's like he wants Daddy's approval when he's talking to him, and he's like, I'm not going to like give it you anything you want. Like, he calls him bad pro. I honestly thought that this scene might end with Homelander just losing his shit and like killing him. I really thought he was going to. because Edgar really does just not hold back. He calls him bad product. That's all he is. He's just simply bad product. He's not a superhero. He's not a person. He's not anything else. He's just bad product. But Homelander's seeking of like gratification, or if not approval from him for this, is just. And what's funny in the scene, Edgar goes out of his way to praise Newman, even though she's betrayed him. He's like, well, I taught her to play both sides, and she's I'm kind of he almost sounds proud of her and not a Homelander. And that's kind of fascinating. And it also pokes at the question, Homelander even says to Newman when he's dropping off the info, he's like, are you thinking about trying to pop my head? I mean, give it a whirl, who knows? So they're kind of playing with the idea that, like, he's not expecting she'll be able to, but maybe she could. We don't know. But it's an interesting development. I think what I appreciate about a lot of these swerves in this episode is that I could have seen a lot of these plots like building all season and then not like finally being enacted until the last episode or two. So the fact that they've completely swerved us on, okay, this building rebellion against Homelander, they've swerved us on Edgar being in control and Homelander getting frustrated with that. They've actually advanced the plot a lot in this episode. It really does feel like we're moving into an exciting different phase of the season, get into the next half, especially with Soldier Boy out now, awake and not running about. There's so much going on, there's so much to do, and that's really cool. But yeah, so yes, death by a dildo is the main takeaway of this episode. I should also mention they did like a parody, obviously it was satirical, but they did like a parody of it's like the Pepsi ad with one of the Kardashians. I don't know which one, I don't know these celebrity types, but it's we have A-Train wanting to actually make a difference, right? So he's actually got a noble goal for once, even though he does something shitty by the end of the episode. But then, like, their like sort of response almost is to put him in this horrible ad, which is like saying, "Hey, this like, energy drink will bring us all together and stop these riots and things." It's really cringeworthy, but it's way funnier. I think as long as you get what it's referencing and you get the joke that it's doing, is that an actual big company tried to do an ad like this. It's because it's showing this like a protest that is the riot police are coming in. It's the idea the black crowd and the riot police are going to clash, and it's going to be this big awful thing. But then offering a drink between them is what makes them all happy, and they all start partying together. It's really insensitive, and the fact that Pepsi actually did this is laughable. But they do a sort of take on that, and as soon as they all cut at the end of the ad, like A-Train just looks like his soul has left his body, and he's ready to collapse, and cringe-inducing pain. But no, it's. This was a very eventful episode. That's one thing with these episodes being a full hour long every time, is that they tend to be quite packed. But credit where credit's due, because it really felt like a full meal of an episode where so many things were set up and so many things paid off the previous episodes as well. But there were so many things set up in both plot lines. I mean, I say both plot lines, I really just mean like, the US and Russia, like separately. And they all kind of crescendoed and gave me a satisfying conclusion where everything going forward feels big. And somehow, once again, they've managed to give Homelander a moment of, oh no, he's really back in control, he's really powerful, he's really scary. Like, somehow, we're in season 3 of this show, and they've never diminished the fear of what Homelander is or what he can be. And I think part of the reason why that is still working is because they keep finding new ways of tying it in to real world elements, right? So this idea that he's appealing to entitled, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Persecution complex. That's the phrase I'm looking for. So white guys with a persecution complex, he's sort of like tapping into that, and that's sort of empowering him, and it being this sort of like self-fulfilling cycle. This new like sort of swerve on it, this new lens on it, is such a cool way to spice it up, that feels like it's adding more to what the satire's doing, that everything still feels fresh. Nothing feels stale because he's still the most evil one. If anything, the only critique I can possibly give is that because I know there's going to be a season 4, I don't really believe that they're going to defeat Homelander at the end of the season, so I'm just curious as to how they're going to like sort of wrap up the season as it is. They did a great last season. They did a great job. Like the way kind of everything like finished last season was phenomenal. So I have faith in them. Like I don't doubt that they're going to do something that's satisfying. But something that other TV shows can falter with is if they're not ready to actually defeat the bad guy that they want to still be the bad guy going forward. Is that sometimes it feels like they're kind of spinning their wheels and they want to keep things sort of in the status quo and they're not willing to move forward. I think so far everything feels like it has moved forward and it's developing into really natural new avenues where they can go with what they're saying about Homelander and what he represents and what these other characters represent. So I think that's really neat, and I'm excited to see what they do with that. So there you go. That's basically it, I think. Forgive me if I forgot anything else that was in the episode, but there's so many moments where Homelander will just like say he's kidding after he says something awful, and it's it does remind you of like assholes in like school who would say really awful things and just say I'm kidding, as if that just sort of lets it all go away. Which is perfect for Homelander because he is just an insecure piece of shit. So yes, here's to, and to be fair, one of the things that probably helps the show is that it's only 8 episodes per season. I think if we'd been doing like 13 per season, or hell, if we were doing 22 per season, at this point we might start to feel the staleness of like stuff. But Kripke and Co know what they're doing, so good stuff. So let me know what you thought of episode 4 in the comments. Like, subscribe, ding the bell for notifications, all that stuff. Get me on the Twitters at Wibble89, or you can get Mailed Fuzz on Twitter at Mailed_Fuzz for channel updates. You can support everything by hitting the super thanks button below, or you can go over to patreon.com/MailFuzzTV and support us over there for as little as $1 per month and help keep all the content coming. But otherwise, that is me. So thank you once again for watching or listening. I always appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?